So PFP, I heard actually about them through social media, and it was quite a fortuitous, I'd say, involvement with them initially. And it was through social media that I'd came across some of their work, and decided that I wanted to get involved personally, actually. And after making that decision, I approached the company. Well, actually, no, I didn't. I approached PFP directly to say, how can I get involved? This is who I am, without mentioning my company at all. And then they actually got back to me to say that one of the directors had been involved in his personal capacity at this company as well. So there was a nice link, which I actually didn't know about. And that's how I got involved with them. It was basically initially just seeing what they've been doing in social media and following various people on Twitter, I think it was a while back now, can't even remember who, and decided to get involved. So the reason I think I got involved is because it spoke to something that I'd been thinking about for quite a while, and that was, how do I personally make an impact or sustainable impact with my limited resources, and also in such a way that it affects a broad spectrum of people and as many people as possible. And the answer before I actually came across PFP that I had wanted to get involved in was education, because I'm of the firm belief that you can, in order for people to escape the poverty trap, and in order for them to have a sustainable future and growth going forward, it's all down to education. So I had made the decision to get involved in education, and with that lens, I think I came across PFP and what they were doing. And I think what appealed to me at PFP's level was that they were essentially taking a top-down approach, where they were focusing on the heads of these schools to make a difference. And I thought that was an absolutely phenomenal idea for me, where you could partner with someone and almost bring a different mindset to that person. And that's what attracted me to PFP. I think the core belief or core message that I had, or I thought about before, was if you could bring sometimes business principles to state organizations or public institutions, and you run it like a business, sometimes you'd improve things considerably. And if you can apply some of those same metrics to, let's say, a school, if possible, then maybe you can achieve the same results. So that's Charmaine is, let me start off by saying she's an amazing, amazing person. And what I love about this program is that it takes you out of your comfort zone in a lot of ways. So as someone working in finance, you become used to meeting the same type of people in the same environments. But meeting someone like Charmaine with a vision for the school, it's fantastic. So she's got an amazing amount of energy. And the first time I met her, I do recall that she was a bit taken aback when she thought, oh, this is maybe, this guy's a bit younger, and it's maybe not what I envisaged immediately, but I think we had a great working relationship after only a couple of meetings, where we both realized, there's great energy here, there's lots of new initiatives. And where it was new for both of us. She was a new principal, and I was obviously new to the program. And it took us, a little while to find our feet, but then once we got going, it was a great partnership. And Charmaine herself, what really struck me about her was her energy and her faith. She had tremendous amounts of it, and I think you needed it in a position. I mean, Bramble Way was when I'd first, heard about the school in Bonteheuwel. So Bonteheuwel's not too far from where I grew up, actually. I grew up in a suburb called Rylands, which is not too far, so I knew it quite well. So when I heard it was a school in Bonteheuwel, I was like, okay, I'm familiar with the place, I understand it, and been there a number of times before. But when Charmaine told me about the story about the school and when she had actually taken over, I was flabbergasted. And I remember thinking to myself, man, what have you got yourself into? The school itself when Charmaine had just taken over, I think was on what they call the orange list, where it was one step away from the Western Cape Department of Education actually tearing the whole place down. It was vandalized, they had lots of dysfunction within the teaching staff, they were understaffed. The place itself, I mean, really represented a shell of a school rather than a school or institution itself. And the history of the school, from what I've heard and done some research and asked around, was that it used to be this beacon of light in the community, and then went through some hard times for a number of reasons. And then, you know, when Charmaine came in, she was a new principal, tasked with this impossible task of turning around an orange school and see what she could do with it. And that took a lot of faith and energy, which not a lot of people, I would say, have that particular skill set for that job and for Bramble Way, but I think Charmaine was perfectly suited to it. And in a very short space of time, she turned around the fortunes of the school, and that is all down to her. It's all down to a pure passion for education, for the students, for the people, and for making or wanting to make it this beacon of light within a community that had significant, and still does have significant socioeconomic problems. And I think she's achieved a lot of that. So the story itself is an amazing one, where, you know, she had to come in, make some tough decisions with existing staff members, with infrastructure that was decrepit and needed a lot of revamping. And she did those, she made those decisions. And I think where Partners for Possibility comes in is that it provides a platform for these headmasters to sound out ideas with other principals, to sound ideas with, you know, partners such as myself, but not just me, with other partners within our circle. But also it provides some training to them, and that training, I think, is highly relevant to them as stakeholders in the education space. When I spoke to the principals, all of them found it highly relevant, highly useful, and very applicable to them on day one. The thing about principals is that it's quite an isolated position. You sit at the top of a pyramid of a school. Everyone feeds up their problems up the pyramid, and there you are, you sit alone, you sit with a lot of these issues that you've actually got to solve, but sometimes don't have the resources to solve them. So it can be quite a lonely position. And I find myself a lot of what I did in this partnership was just to lend a voice to Charmaine. And she found that incredibly useful, where she was able to just bounce a few ideas off me. When things were tough, she would say, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And that was incredibly useful, and in my humble way was the way in which I could add value to Charmaine and her incredible journey with the school. She has turned it around completely. So if you go to Bramble Way now, you'll see that it's completely unrecognizable as an institution, as a school, from where it was when Charmaine took over the school. And credit to her, credit to her team. Old principals, allegiances to old founders and the like. And the first real strategic discussion we had was, how do you get everyone on board and, you know, pulling in the same direction? So we had a few discussions, we had a few ideas around workshops, and ultimately how sometimes she had to make hard decisions, where if there were certain, you know, members within the faculty that were not pulling their weight or making it difficult for their staff as a whole, then she would make tough decisions about that. And I remember having the discussion with her around how it would be treated in the, you know, private business space, and how you can take some of those lessons, if not all of them, and transfer them to, you know, the public teaching space, tough as it is. And I think Charmaine, you know, she took on board a lot of that and tried to change and do as much as you can within, you know, the framework, within the limitations of what you can do in the public teaching space. So that was the first big strategic call. And then that also, I would say, move naturally to our next objective, which was almost to set measurement or KPIs for us as a team, but also for how she could measure herself and improvements at the school. So we went through a short exercise of trying to set this out as a dashboard and putting objectives on and seeing where we could actually meet them and how quickly we could meet some of them versus some of the longer objectives. And that was a sobering exercise to go through it and understand how many challenges there are in each of these institutions. And it helped focus the mind on what was, primarily achievable up front. And ultimately, it was a good exercise to understand the scope of what needed to be done. And it became clear that it's not something that can be done within a year space, which is the timeline traditionally on this partnership. It's something that can take, decades almost. Incredibly humbling experience, as it always is. Because in finance and in the business world, in the world in which a lot of us professionals live, is a bubble. And whilst I wouldn't say it was shocking to me, because I had been exposed to it before, I've seen the areas before, it certainly was eye-opening. In that a lot of the things we take for granted when we send our kids to school cannot be taken for granted at some of these places. And I think the difference it made to me was when I understood what we quantify or think of as problems in the business world, or where it keeps you up late nights, or it makes you think that the world is against you, are almost insignificant sometimes in comparison to some of the problems that these principals sit with. So whilst our problems and some of the problems may be monetary or commercial, the real world problems that some of these principals sit with are life or death type of problems, are life changing problems in a lot of the circumstances. So it's incredibly humbling experience. And I think that what it did for me before and after, it just keeps your feet firmly rooted to the floor. And you, despite everything that goes on, you always remember there's people doing fantastic things out there, and people that are also making real world differences every single day. And we should always remember that. Sometimes we all forget that when we are in our private lives, in our private jobs. And the best part of it was being able to sit in those workshops with the principals, for me, to be honest with you. And the reason for that was when a lot of these sessions were brainstorming sessions with them. And it wasn't just the dialogue, but it was more how can we actually put some of these lessons into use practically every day. And the best part of those workshops was seeing these principals and being able to workshop with them on how they could apply some of these to everyday scenarios for them. And depending on where you are and what you do, some of those lessons are applicable to every day, some of them are not as applicable. So to me, my favorite workshop was the Time to Think workshop, and that was because it highlighted some things that I had been exposed to before during my studies, where your ability to take time out from the ability for you to take time out of your everyday self, to actually really contemplate the bigger picture. And I'm also forgetting what it was called. It was called creative strategies. It was a similar concept to what we were exposed to before. So for me, it was a good course in that it highlighted some stuff that I'd learned before. But why it was my favorite was not because of the content, but because of the way in which you were able to see these real concepts being able to be used by these principals on a real, almost on a real-time basis, which was great. I think for me, PFP stands for providing support to the pillars of education in our country. That is essentially boiling it down to fundamentals. I think that these individuals in these positions need that type of support, and PFP does an excellent job in providing that support in some way or the other. And it's taken a novel approach to doing it. It's not simply providing funding, but it's providing, in some cases, sustainable relationships for these individuals. And in so doing, by strengthening the pillars of the school, you're strengthening the school as a whole.